And David actually beat me in a two nights tango game, which sent me below 2,700. And that was actually the last time I think that I was below 2,700. I think I was just sort of stated that I think it's also the last time that I'll ever be below, it's the last time that I'll ever have been rated below 2,700 because I have a feeling that I'm not going to be playing chess if my rating dips that low in the future. So David will probably go down in the history books.
Hey everyone, welcome to Dojo Talks. We have a very special guest today, Grandmaster Hikaru Nakamura, who's going to join us to talk about many things, but generally speaking, we're talking about the chess economy as a whole, what it's like to be a professional player. Hikaru, of course, has been at the top for many years, and we're very excited to hear his perspective on many things like what it's like and the economic side of chess. Actually, Hikaru, first question for you, just to kind of start things off. First of all, thank you for joining us.
It's good to be here. I did want to start, like, one thing I think people are wondering is, how much do I listen to podcasts, or how often do I do these things? And I do listen sometimes. But actually there's a very specific instance which I sort of really started listening to you guys fully, and that was during this 960 event in St. Louis about, I think, a month and a half ago. And I forget which day it was, but it was late at night after one of the rounds. And I decided to actually play some 960 on chess.com against this guy, Nicholas Theodorou. Someone can probably go and fact check and find the exact date for this. But while I was playing him, I don't even remember how it happened, but I basically put your podcast on in the background, sort of like background noise or something to listen to while I was playing those games. And pretty much since then, I've been listening on and off to your podcast. So you guys do a great job. And I think also one of the things that distinguishes you guys, or one of the things that also interested me in terms of coming on here, is that you guys are very much coming at it from an outsider perspective. I think there are a lot of podcasts out there. Of course, there's like the C Squared with Fabiano, but it's very much like a professional level. It feels like it's more geared towards a certain audience, where I feel like, from what I've heard you guys talk about, it's more towards a casual fan, someone who's a passing interest in the game, in the tournaments, and what is going on, generally speaking. So hopefully I can shed some insight on a lot of different topics.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks for coming on. My first question for you, just to kind of start things off, like, I was wondering, how do you choose events to play in these days? Like, you play the 960 event, Grand Swiss. Congrats, by the way, on the Grand Swiss qualifying for the candidates. I think, yeah, we'd love to ask you about that as well.
Yeah, so I think to start off, of course, my career can be broken down into probably two segments. There's a segment essentially as a professional player. Once I broke 2,700, roughly around 2009, 2010. As I mentioned before we started, one of your fellow podcasters, David Pruess, he holds a special distinction. I actually crossed 2,700. I think it was in the summer of 2008. And then I played this national open. I believe it's national open in Las Vegas. And David actually beat me in a two nights tango game, which sent me below 2,700. And that was actually the last time I think that I was below 2,700. I think I was just sort of stated that I think it's also the last time that I'll ever be below, it's the last time that I'll ever have been rated below 2,700 because I have a feeling that I'm not going to be playing chess if my rating dips that low in the future. So David will probably go down in the history books. So basically my career, there's the professional player, which roughly it starts around 2009 till about, I would say, end of 2019, very clearly. Now, I was very lucky because as I was becoming very strong, I broke 2,700. This also coincided with the rise of chess in St. Louis, when you had Rex Singfield, who retired from the financial world, moved back to St. Louis. I think the club opened in July of 2008, if I'm not mistaken. And then the 2009 U.S. Championship was the first major event held there. And so I was very lucky it sort of coincided. But from 2009 onwards, it seemed like there were a lot of things that originated in St. Louis. First, there was the U.S. Championship, led to U.S. Women's Championship, other events. There was also the Grand Chess Tour, which started in St. Louis. I think initially it started with the Singfield Cup in like 2012, if I remember correctly. I think Magnus, Levon, myself, and Gata played. Maybe I have the years confused. But at any rate, it started with that. It led to many more tournaments. And once the Grand Chess Tour really became established around 2014, 2015, I would start playing a lot of tournaments. I would play usually one tournament in January. It would be Gibraltar or Tata Steel, either the Open or the closed tournament. Normally in April, there was the U.S. Championship. Actually, let me backtrack. In February, usually there was an event in Zurich. March, I would take off. April, there was the U.S. Championship, so that's already 3 events. And then usually the Grand Chess Tour kicked off around like May or June. There's usually an event in like Paris. There's an event, I think, in Belgium, if I remember correctly. And it sort of covered the whole summer. It started in May, ran through about August, September, concluding with the Singfield Cup. There was also, at the time, a grand final held in London at the end of the year as well. I think it's the London Chess Classic. But normally I would play, I would say on average, if we're looking at just like classical or serious rapid events, since they sort of were already a little bit intermingled, probably about 11 to 12 events a year. And this is with events averaging at least, I would say, a minimum of 5+ days, anywhere from 5 to probably 5 days to about 14 days or 2 weeks. So normally it's like 11 or 12 events. Now, once the pandemic occurred, of course, everything changed. I'm sure we'll talk about that as a separate segment. But nowadays, the way that I look at it is very different. For me, I look at tournaments essentially, what are the organizers doing for chess? That is probably the most important thing for me. So with Norway Chess, for example, which I play, technically it is part of the FIDE circuit, a new circuit that was created this year for qualification to the candidates. So I play that event mainly, though, because the organizers have been organizing that event for many years now. It is an event that does not really have a major benefactor or sponsor behind it. I think almost every year they're trying to get new sponsors. I think in the past they've had some water companies. They had a knitting company that I think was involved. I think there was a tractor company. A lot of different sort of sponsors over the years to keep the tournament going. It's not something that's relying on one individual. And I think that sort of speaks to how well they've done, that they can keep such a high level event running for so many years, despite sort of the instability, you could say, when it comes to sponsorship. So like Norway is one event that I played mainly because of the organization. I did play Tata Steel, the India event last year. And that's also because I feel the organizer of the Tata Steel events in India and Vaikon Zay, Jeroen Vandenberg, is another person who's trying his best to raise the profile of chess, despite having what I would say are limited funds to some degree. He is very much beholden to the sponsors that he has and the budget that he has. It's not something that can be expanded. Not to like start drama or controversy, but I think certainly if you go back maybe 1 or 2 years, there was definitely some talk around Alireza Firouzja and why he didn't play in the event there. I think it was a monetary issue. So Vandenberg is another organizer who I'm very supportive of. So I have considered playing in some of those events. But besides that, I mean, the only other criteria I have is essentially, does the event qualify for, is it a qualification for the candidates? And so when I played in the Grand Swiss, it was a qualification. When I played in what else did I play? Doha. That was also to potentially qualify via the circuit or via the rating, whatever it might be. But also even in Doha, when I played there, I feel that they're trying to restart a tournament that happened several years ago. I think it was canceled at the time. They're trying to bring it back. So it's another event where I feel like the organizers and the organization is very good. And I think it's very positive for chess if there are more tournaments in the Middle East as well. So mainly it's whether it's a qualification for the candidates and whether it's whether I sort of like the organizers and what they're trying to do for chess as a whole.
Yeah. Do you feel like chess organizing is kind of thankless? Like they're often just, at best, like breaking even with the event? Actually, we were just talking about your video with you're reacting to the Chess Bar video about the tournaments and the cost for grandmasters. And I was just thinking, like, for organizers also, it's like very hard to make money on a chess event.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly that's one of the most difficult things with organizing tournaments. And I think, also broadly speaking, I've been quite critical of FIDE over time, but I think that at the end of the day, it is very difficult and it's very thankless. There is not a lot of money in it. Obviously, for the players, if you finish at the very top, you do very well. But pretty much everyone else, whether it's the organizers, the arbiters, the other players, they're doing it more because they love the game, or it's sort of like for the passion that they have for chess. So yeah, I think it's very, very difficult. It's very thankless, and I think at the end of the day, it's a good thing that there are people who are crazy enough to want to organize tournaments, because certainly the organizers are not making money for the most part. In fact, I think most chess events, even online for that matter, are not profitable as a whole.
Yeah. Can you tell us something about what qualifies as being a good organizer? Like when people are you're saying something that's like good for chess, what's the direction that you're looking for?
Yeah, so I think for starters, it's how much visibility is there for the tournament? How much is it out there on social media? Obviously, in the post-pandemic world, Most people get their news about chess online. They do get it very specifically, say on Instagram or Twitch, TikTok, or even Twitter/X. So it's sort of the visibility that's out there. I think whether that is internationally on social media or even whether that is like domestically. So for example, with Norway Chess, it was actually on national TV. I think it's very much in the newspapers. There's a lot of coverage of it. And most of the people who were in Stavanger, just the locals that I ran into, knew that there was a chess tournament going on. So I think that's the first thing. Also, I think the conditions, like what is the playing site like? What is the hotel like? And in general, like again, every event is different, so you can't just like use one model because we'll get into this when we talk about juniors and other parts of the economy. But certainly, like with Norway Chess, they had cars there so they could take the players to the site. The food was covered at the hotel. Rooms were great. So as a whole, all those things were very good. I would say in Doha as well, very similar. Transportation was good. Playing hall was good. Food was good. And really I guess in Doha there's some drama related to Magnus, but overall a very, very drama-free experience.
Okay. So both providing a good experience to the players, but also very important is how it's sort of reaching out to the community.
Well, yeah, I think also, again, all these topics probably get interspersed and they all kind of blend together. But I think certainly for me, when I look towards the future of chess, I think everyone is getting their news online. And I think organizers, and this actually applies to chess world as a whole, have to understand that power of reaching out. And I think it's very important also that like people like Levy or myself make a big effort to mention these sorts of things on YouTube because there are places where I played tournaments, and people are completely unaware. And a good example actually was the Grand Swiss in Isle of Man. And Isle of Man it's very small, the main city of Douglas. I don't even know how big it is in terms of population size, but I'm guessing it's not more than maybe 10,000. Could be wrong on that, of course, but it's very tiny. And I must have gotten recognized by like 3 or 4 locals randomly, and none of them had a clue the tournament was going on. Literally zero clue whatsoever. Had no idea the event was going on.
That's
it's
even
such
people
a small
who
place.
recognize you on the street don't know there's a tournament in their hometown.
Correct. Yes. And that has happened in other places as well. But sort of considering how small Isle of Man is, it sort of speaks, I think, to the lack of visibility of the tournament as a whole. So, I think that that organizers and just the chess world as a whole need to really understand that, and they need to make a much bigger push. Whether it's themselves putting out tweets, or even frankly the players putting things on social media. I think as a whole, everybody needs to try harder. Is what I would say.
Oh, well. Yeah. It feels like there's so much potential now. Do you feel like there has been this like second boom in 2023 where just so many more like college kids, high school kids are getting into it, and just like regular working adults that like never played a tournament, never even thought about it, they just downloaded a chess.com app on their phone and now they play?
Yeah, so I think in terms of people playing chess, it's never been more popular. I think really, to me, actually, boom. I think boom is kind of the wrong word to use. So I think boom very specifically referred to the rise on Twitch and YouTube, and not chess as a whole. Like, because when you think about the boom, I would say chess.com, for example, I think they're doing extremely well. So I don't think they've really seen any kind of downturn in terms of like signups and people playing on the site. I think it's probably close to the all-time high. Maybe not as high as in January when there was the whole Mittens event, but as a whole, yeah, I think there are a lot of people who are still getting into chess every day, and I think chess remains very strong. And also, I think coming sort of from the side of like seeing the whole rise of chess on Twitch and YouTube at the same time as the pandemic, also at the same time as the rise of esports, they've sort of gone in very different directions. When you look at esports as a whole, many of the esports organizations are struggling. In fact, I think a few of them have even just sort of gone bankrupt. And chess, meanwhile, remains very, very strong. So I think as a whole, chess is doing very, very well, and I think there are more and more people getting into it casually than ever before, and I think that's going to continue for quite a while still.
One thing that David was saying before we started that I want to get your take on is that with the boom, obviously you've said chess.com is doing great, right? Some streamers like yourself are doing great. But when I go to like the open tournaments that you grew up with, they're the same amount of people, same prize fund, like the exact same prize fund. And it seems like, this is why I want to get your take, that the top tournaments are basically the same as they were before as well.
Yeah, so I completely agree with you. I think when you look at the boom, I think that where you'll see that is specifically in kids tournaments, this classic events. I think there are many more kids who are playing those events. I think when you look at sort of whether it's like the amateur level, like Expert 2000, maybe IM, or up to like 2700 GM, I would agree with you. I don't think anything has fundamentally changed. I think the budgets have remained the same, and I think that's mostly due to organizers not really either feeling the need to try and expand or not understanding the ecosystem in the world that we live in today. And I think it is sad to see, because you're right. If you go to like the World Open, which is an event that I played, I don't even know how many times you go to the National Open, all these different events. It does feel very much like it's the exact same. And I think that's definitely disappointing, considering that we have seen, I would say, sort of at the very top end for the very top players, it's improved, and also at the bottom end, obviously it's not financial, but you see a lot more kids. So it feels like everywhere in the middle things have stayed the same, but on the ends it has completely changed. So it is sad to see. And I think, again, the main reason for that is that there is sort of, I think, very little incentive to really change anything for those organizers. Like what are they aiming to achieve exactly? I mean, are they intending to try and turn a massive profit? I mean, it's hard enough to turn a profit as is, so I don't think that's realistic. In terms of trying to put that work out to get an extra few hundred players, like, I mean, just flood social media with things. I mean, it's very thankless, and I think it's a difficult task. And I think the lack of motivation, sort of the incentives versus like just putting in that hard work, is not really there. So it has stayed the same, and I think I don't think that's going to change.
Okay. Yeah, that's my huge question. Is really like, I feel like the boom has like hit some parts, but not really affected lots of other parts of the chess economy. And
yeah, so I mean, I think first and foremost, what I would say is chess, very similar to probably any field out there in business or otherwise. I feel like it's there's this thing, the first mover advantage. I think really when the pandemic hit, the people who were in it at the time, I mean, I would just say like myself, Botez, Levy, and Chessbra specifically, because we were the four biggest by far, we're sort of in the right place at the right time. And I think that, even some of the people who've come onto the scene since then have actually had quite a bit of success. You have people like Anna Kramling, for example, you have Nemo and others. And I feel like anyone who was there at the time or sort of saw where it was going succeeded. I would say now it's very difficult to break in. I think a lot of people want to. But on the other hand, there's this tricky thing, which is that if you aren't sort of on the inside doing it, there are a lot of little things that go behind that happen behind the scenes. So it's not as simple as just boot up your stream, like stream for 10 hours every day, get a massive audience. And I think a lot of people saw what happened. A lot of people sort of want to get in on that, but they also don't really understand all the work and sort of all the groundwork that was laid in order for it to happen in the first place. So I mean, it definitely has benefited the content creators. I think it has benefited some chess players who are making courses. I mean, maybe this is a little bit of a hot take, but I actually think that a lot of the players who are in the 2600 range who are doing these Chessable courses, for example, are actually giving away their secrets at what I would say is way below a fair market value, because I think many people get access to these courses and can use them, like myself and others. And at the end of the day, they can't really use them. I don't think it benefits them as much as it potentially could. Specifically, like if say there was a 2600, I'll just give a name because I've seen his course. But there's this player who represents the U.S., Darius Swearts, and he did a course on the Spanish. I think it was either Archangel or Moeller, one of those lines. And first thing, he played it in the U.S. Championship against Lenier Dominguez. He was very lucky to escape with a draw. He forgot his prep. He was completely lost, whatever. But for me, for example, if I can get that course, I can use it. A lot of people who are lower rated cannot use that course. So there's very little incentive for them to buy that course because it's not going to be productive for them. But even beyond that, if he were to say make these courses and not publish them and then give them to someone for the candidates, basically work with a player, he would get much more value out of that course than publishing it on Chessable. I think a lot of people have done that, and for some of them it's very profitable, but I think as a whole it actually it's benefited the serious competitors more than it's benefited the publishers or those GMs who have made those courses.
That's crazy.
Wow.
Because I was thinking in terms of like, what's the income of a 26 to 2675 GM now versus 8 to 10 years ago, and has it changed? And the one thing that I thought of was maybe some of them are making a lot of money on Chessable courses. That was like the one thing I thought of as that could be like an obvious change or advantage.
Yeah, I mean, I think for some, again, I think some do. I think much like most parts of the chess content experience of Boom, whether it's Twitch, YouTube, or Chessable, or even on chess.com for that matter, is that I think some of the very top ones do very well, but I think as a whole, it doesn't really filter down the way that you would expect it to. I mean, obviously, I don't have the actual numbers, but I don't believe that it filters down as much as people assume it does. So I think they can make some income, but I think, for example, I think Anish Giri, I suspect he does quite well. But I think for a lot of people, if they don't have sort of a social media profile or big visibility, they're not doing as well off of it as one would assume. And that's also why I think for the players who are in that range, it's very difficult, because do you want to make those courses? Do you want to sort of like try and stream? Do you want to go down these routes? Because this is really the only way that chess has changed substantially, is that the ways that you can monetize are purely on social media.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we were just talking before the stream about how whether we've made enough with Dojo, or if we could have just been like teaching private lessons, these last like 3.5 years and made more that way. But I don't know. I feel like there's a ton of potential with streaming. The nice thing about courses is like once you've done one, you put it out, it's up forever, and then it can always go up in popularity later on. I feel like these guys, they should be doing non-opening courses, stuff that's just more, it's gonna like last a long time on like general principles and stuff.
Well, I mean, I can give you one little bit of insight, one little secret then, I guess, which is, one of the things that makes both Levy and myself so successful on YouTube is the sheer volume of videos that we've created over the last couple of years, and then the number of videos that are very, very relevant, whether it's like tier lists or just general opening principles and analysis. When you have like a massive volume or massive collection like that, and it's not purely it's something that reaches to the entire audience of chess. There are videos of mine that on YouTube sometimes do go viral like a year and a half or 2 years later after they've been published. So that is something that's really, really important down the road. But I think also just from my personal story, obviously I was in the right place at the right time. I had started streaming very seriously in 2019 before the whole pandemic. But I think that even for me, when I started out doing it, obviously a lot of it was luck. But I also was doing it because I enjoyed it. I wasn't doing it to try and make money. I think anytime you approach something with the attitude that you have to make money, it detracts. And I would say for almost all the people who've made it big in streaming or content creation, I don't think any of them went into it with this expectation of like making lots and lots of money, being hugely successful. They did it mostly for fun, something that they did because they enjoyed it, and then it became something bigger. So I do think when it comes to trying to build a platform on social media, you have to do it for reasons that are not purely monetary, because or they're not just monetary reasons. It has to be something. There has to be something more to it. So I do think that a lot of the one thing that a lot of people also don't realize is that viewers, I mean, we like to make the joke like everybody's watching who's like 10 years old or 8 years old or whatever. It's just a bunch of kids. Nobody's serious, blah, blah, blah. But I think that at the end of the day, viewers are actually very smart, and they can see when the streamers are being genuine and when they aren't being genuine, or like their motivations aren't for the right reasons. And I think that also is very important. A lot of people don't really understand that.
Yeah, definitely. You got to enjoy the streaming. Otherwise, it wouldn't work.
So Jesse and Kostya, you guys have each published courses on Chessable. If you can speak about it freely, like how do you feel about like how much you basically earn from that compared to other ways of earning money as a chess player? Like, do you feel like it went well? Did you feel like you got a taste of the chess boom?
I mean, it's fine. It wasn't huge money or anything. It's also like a real pain. It's a pain to create those courses. It's a very bureaucratic process. Chessable, man, they got all these things that they want you to do. So it was a real struggle to actually get both of those courses published. And I think me and Kostya made a little money, but it wasn't extravagant or anything,
I would say no. My course has done well. I mean, I did a course on endgame studies, and definitely. I don't think I could have sold that to any top players. Like, hey, do you want some of my endgame study? But but Chessable has been very nice to me. Like, they've definitely done their share of like promoting the course. I'm sure they've promoted my course more than they've promoted someone who's like lesser well known. So a lot of it, I think, has to do with just Chessable's like marketing team
choices. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think as also that's the other thing as we look into the future. You look at like the talents that are up and coming. If we're trying to increase the reach of chess, we're trying to make it much more commercially viable. It's going to be very important that the juniors, the kids who are up and coming these days, learn how to use social media, that they do sort of build a brand in a sense for themselves. It doesn't have to be like streaming completely, but even like Anish, for example, on Twitter, like he is putting out a lot of tweets. He's trying to raise his profile quite a bit. And I think for the juniors, as we go forward, that is going to be very, very important if we hope for sort of this chess boom to continue to some degree, because otherwise I have a feeling that once we get past the days of myself and Magnus and others, there's a very good chance that chess could essentially go back to where it was before, where the interest dries up simply because the top players are not household names and they're not very well known.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, no, the fans I think love that the top players started like tweeting a lot. Like you obviously, Anish, Magnus, like Fabi, he kind of started tweeting like last couple of years, like more recently. I think the fans like really enjoyed that. So yeah, I think that's absolutely huge for keeping the interest.
Yeah, seeing players in the confessionals and stuff. Like when I was younger, I had to take a plane to Wake on Zay to see a top player for the first time. Like I'd never, heard a top player talk about chess or seen them sit at a board and think and stuff. I mean, now we've got top players in the US, but back then, like in terms of world elite. And now you could be sitting at home and you can like hear what Hikaru was thinking during his game and after the game and everything. And that applies for, several other of the top players too. So
yeah, I mean, I think it's a very special time that we live in. I mean, for myself, the way that I generally look at things is that I think, I mean, maybe some people like chess.com won't be thrilled with me saying this, but I feel like we reached a peak in terms of like the pure like interest in chess. But I think the most important thing, at least from my perspective, is maintaining it where it's at and looking at all the different things that have happened over the last few years and trying to get people to do these things down the road so that, when the days of myself, when the days of Magnus are gone, that it does continue as is. And yeah, it's very special for people to be able to see that. I think also, one thing that I learned, I think in 2019, it's mostly by accident, of course, is that when I started streaming initially, of course, I was a pro chess player, very, very serious. I mean, definitely too serious, I would say, looking back on it now. And I mean, there's this thing, and you will see it amongst a lot of the top players still, where they tend to be very serious. You play it very, very close to the vest. So what I mean by that is you don't really show your personality much. You definitely don't talk about anything that was really important from your game. And I mean, I've given this example many times, but the most obvious example is Levon Aronian, the Armenian American Grandmaster. And if you watch his interviews very closely and you're say 2650 or above, and you look at his history of the games and you look at his comments and you match them up, there are many times where he'll say something that is just simply not true. He'll say like, "Oh, I looked at this, I forgot this line," a lot of these sorts of things, and it's simply not true. But when I started streaming in 2019, what I realized is that it's much more important to sort of open up. It's much more important to try and share that knowledge because really, I mean, if you think about it, yes, I was a top player. I have a career, maybe 5-10 more years, if that. But what about beyond that? Those secrets or, my knowledge, whatever I may have, that's not really going to be important to me. It's not going to serve any use for me down the road. And so I think that's sort of, it taught me when I started streaming in 2019 that you need to sort of open up. You need to share more of these insights. You need to be who you are. And when you do that, I think a lot of people can become very interested in chess in a different way than just watching the generic, boring interview after a game.
Well, Hikaru, I think one of the things that's fascinating to me about you is like you have put yourself out there, hours and hours of opening yourself up, as you said. But at the same time, like I'm sure that you're an enigma to your fans, myself included. And there's like at least 3 things, like when you watch a good movie and you're kind of like, well, what's going on with this character? What's driving this character? How is this going? And you have, for just speaking for myself as a fan, but I'm sure other people feel this way. You have at least 3 enigmas that are like driving it. I'm like, oh my God, what's the plot point? What's going on with this guy? And so I want to ask you about a couple of those, but I just want to say that up front because I think that is some of the thing that's interesting to watch about you because you're open, but at the same time, there's some complexities about who you are that are like, oh, this is really interesting. Like what's going on with this guy, But let me ask you the one that I'm sure is on everyone's mind. Okay, because this is like an obvious discrepancy. Like you were watching a movie of yourself, this would be the question you'd be asking. It would be this. Hikaru is about to play the biggest tournament of his life. And he's talking to these three chumps. He's talking to these three chumps instead of like, doing whatever hard chess work it might be. And I'm sure everyone's got that question on their mind because this big tournament's coming up, right? And not only us three chumps, but you're going to be streaming, opening yourself up, maybe even showing some of your opening prep. And so can we talk about that a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So, I think for me, this goes back to 2016 if we're going to talk about the candidates specifically. And in 2015, I played the FIDE Grand Prix. I qualified for the candidates tournament. And in 2016, I actually sort of went the quote unquote traditional route. And I mean, I would say throughout my career, I've been very non-traditional in many ways. But for that event, I was very traditional. I think the event was held in March of 2016. And I think it was in December or January. I basically took 1 month. I was in Italy. I did a very long training camp with Peter Lecco, as well as my longtime second, Chris Littlejohn. And we spent 1 month there. I think I was back in Florida, prepping nonstop, reviewing lines nonstop, pretty much straight up until the tournament. And in the tournament itself, what happened is, first of all, I sort of reviewed too much. I confused all my lines. I lost some games very early on, specifically the game against Sergei Karyakin in the Queen's Indian defense where I had the black pieces. I confused the move order, lost that game very poorly. And so when I lost that game, lost the other games, I actually was having a very bad event. But by the end, I won 2 games, I think against Topalov and Anand. Had a decent score. Of course, I wasn't anywhere near good enough to qualify for the match, but I had a decent score. So when I played the candidates there, the main lesson that I learned from that event was essentially that when you take the event too seriously and you prepare nonstop, you have all these very, very bad thoughts. And this actually goes back to the chess economy, but a lot of my thoughts, and I think this is it's not a good thing for sure when you think like this, but a lot of my thoughts around the time were sort of like, okay, I'm playing the candidates and I win this tournament. Okay, first of all, I'm going to get a bunch of money for winning the tournament, but if I get to that match, I'm going to get like $1 million. Like that's going to set me up, somewhat. I don't want to say for the rest of my life, but it's going to set me up. I'm going to be in a very good position. I will have made more money from that event than I would have made potentially from my entire career, as much as I would have made over essentially like a decade of playing the game. So I had a lot of these thoughts in my head. I over prepped. I did all these things, and it simply was way too much for me. So if we fast forward to the 2022 candidates, which I played in Spain, I actually sort of went the exact opposite direction. I did a lot less preparation and training. I mean, I don't want to say how much I did, but it was not every day. It was not for months on end. And so I sort of put in a lot of work, but I felt like I used my time in a much more, in a much better way than I had in 2016. It wasn't simply brute forcing, spending every day, every waking moment thinking about chess, thinking about the candidates, all these other things. And so that decision in 2022 to approach the tournament the way that I did was 100% informed by the 2016 candidates. And the other big takeaway for me from the 2016 candidates is that essentially, I don't want to say it's all luck, but a lot of the tournament is luck in terms of who you play in what round, who gets nervous, who makes a blunder, all these other things. And I felt very much that it was completely out of my control. I didn't feel like, I mean, if I had won every game like what Nepo did actually last year, then yeah, sure, you can just coast to victory. But as a whole, it felt to me like a lot of that it's just a crapshoot. It's just luck. Whatever happens, it's a lottery. And so that informed my decisions in 2022. So now if we look at 2023, or actually let me backtrack for 1 second. Going into 2022, probably going into 2022 candidates, my biggest regret in my entire chess career, without a doubt, was my performance in 2016 in the candidates. And the reason is because I felt that there were games I lost out of the opening. I did everything wrong. I felt too much pressure. I didn't play anywhere near the level that I was capable of. Now, does that mean that I would have qualified, played a match, whatever? No, it doesn't. But I didn't feel that I had played at a level that was satisfactory. So in 2022, I think I repaired all that damage, where I even had a chance potentially to finish second if I had not lost a ding in the last round. And I had a good event. And to me, that sort of proved that no matter what, I had the ability to where I could win the tournament, where I could play a match. And that really was good enough for me. And so as we go into 2023, I feel basically that it's a free roll for me, where it doesn't matter. I can do well, I can do badly. Doesn't matter. I already sort of erased the one big regret, or the one sort of what if doubtful questions that I had in my mind. So I am still going to prepare quite seriously for the tournament, but it doesn't necessarily change anything for me. And also the reason I say that is because, first of all, Magnus Carlsen is not the world champion, but secondarily, from a financial standpoint, I do much better from creating content than I do from playing chess. And we can debate whether that's, I mean, many people think that's a great pity that that's the case, as opposed to it being a good thing, but that is simply the cold hard reality or the truth about the situation. So I'm going into it very much from the perspective of I'll do my preparation, probably quite similar to what I did in 2022. And I've said this on my stream before, but it's November. I'm not even thinking about the candidates right now. I'll start thinking about the candidates in probably January. I mean, I really have not thought about it at all whatsoever. So for me, it's more about just doing work a certain way, a way that I think is much different from the past. I would also say even my successes in the Grand Swiss or elsewhere. I mean, I'm still spending a lot of time preparing, but it is not the 10 hours, maybe not 10, but more like 6, 7, 8 hours every day that it used to be. Like I use my time much more efficiently. And maybe that also is a byproduct of streaming, frankly, because with streaming, when I'm streaming 7, 8 hours every day, I do have to figure out how to budget my time. What am I going to do with those few hours in the day when I'm not actually working? So I think for me, it's mostly just figuring out how to use the time. And I know for a lot of people, it's like it's unconscionable that I can possibly like look at the candidates and be so blasé. It's like, it's just a tournament. Who cares? Whatever. But I think for me, I've just found sort of the happy in between where, of course, I want to do well. I want to be competitive, but it doesn't ultimately change anything for me. And I think, if I could have had this mindset maybe like 10 years ago, it would have been very interesting to see if I could have competed with Magnus. Alas, we'll never know. But still, I think I'm in a pretty good place.
So there's an obvious follow-up that is another, like what every chess fan I'm sure is wondering is you've done great in the last year. I mean, stunning. And it's surprising it in two obvious levels, right? One, because everyone can see you streaming. You're not working like people imagine, world championship candidates might be working. So that's number one. But then number two, normally like players peak around 28, and you're around 35. So it's like this very surprising thing. And one thing, we were talking about this Agar tweet that if you take just the last year's results, you're number one in the world. I mean, stunning, right? And I remember back in the day, just your struggle to make it into the top 20 and then top 10. That was a huge struggle for you. I remember congratulating you, like must have been St. Louis 2011 or right around there. And it was like, oh my God, Hikaru really made it, right around that point. And that was such a struggle. And whereas this feels like, oh, this is easy. Now this is like this easy walk,
Yeah, I think, I mean, there are a couple of components to that. First of all, I think without any pressure, it's easier to perform better. And I don't think this just applies to chess. I think if you're at the top of any field, it's very important for whatever you're doing for it to feel fresh, to be enjoying it. And I think that's one thing that is not talked about at all, which is that almost all the top chess players are playing too much. And that of course, is a byproduct of the pandemic with all these online events now, in addition to all the over-the-board events. But I do feel that most of the top players are playing too many games. They're just like Wesley So is a perfect example. I think he's probably played 1 or 2 events every single month of this year. And unfortunately for Wesley, it's showing, I think, in his results in recent times. He looks bored. The games are not exciting. He's making blunders left and right. It feels like, at least in the Rapid and Blitz events that I just saw in St. Louis. And I think a lot of players are doing this. And for that reason, with it not being fresh, I don't think they're playing up to their true potential. And I understand it, because at the end of the day, if the players are trying to make a living, we're in this time where for the top players, with all the Chess Champions Tours events, Title Tuesday, and I think also like Speed Chess Championship, etc., it goes on, combined with all the over-the-board events, there are more events now for the top players than there ever have been, probably in the entire history of chess. So for the top players, I think they view it as like, well, we have this great opportunity to make more money than we've ever made before. But at the same time, you're also sacrificing the quality. And I could give another example, which is like Gukesh from India. Very, very strong player. He's 2750, I feel like, just a month ago. Has 2 bad tournaments in Doha and the Grand Swiss. And just like that, he's just an average 2710 out of nowhere. He went from basically being on the cusp of top 10, top 5 to suddenly being like number 30 in the world out of the blue. So I think that's the first thing. I think they're playing too much, so they're not enjoying chess that much. Whereas I actually am playing a lot less. And I think when you play less, when you're playing less and there's no pressure, it's very freeing. For me, I enjoy it because at least in my mindset, when I go into a tournament these days, I'm just playing to be competitive and have fun. I have no other thoughts whatsoever. So like when I sit down at the board and I play like the game against like Fabi or Cheparinov in those last couple of rounds, I'm looking at it as like, oh man, these are the last couple of games of chess I'm playing before I have to go back to my regular job. So my mindset is that it's, for me, it's simply a vacation, or it's just a break from what I do every single day. And I know for a lot of people, that's going to sound completely insane. But that's really how I do view it. So like when I get to the end of the turn, I'm looking at it's like, I'm playing this against like, wow, like these are like the last hours. I got to enjoy them before I have to go home and get back to streaming. So for me, I think it's a combination of playing a lot less, being a lot fresher, really just enjoying the game as well. I mean, of course, I'm still studying, but then I think the other thing is that everybody's playing too many events. They're playing way too many tournaments, and so I think the quality of top level chess at the moment is definitely dipping quite a bit. And I also feel like when I look at some of the Magnus games, some of the mistakes he makes, like yesterday in his game against Bier from Denmark, when he played this Rook B2 move, that felt like a move that I would play that in Title Tuesday. Like, it's just a quick blitz move, play this move, and then, of course, Bier finds this awesome Knight F5 move, and suddenly Magnus is in a lot of trouble. And I think that's the thing, is like even Magnus, for that matter, with all the online events, just playing so much chess in general, it's starting to add up. And I think, so I think it's a combination of just like feeling very free, playing chess and enjoying it, unlike before. I mean, honestly, I said this during the Grand Swiss, and I don't know if you guys caught it, but there was an interview, I think, after the final round when I was in the studio with David Howell and Ivan Kahuska, and I actually asked David a question. I said, like, David, you're probably enjoying chess a lot more now than you did before the pandemic, because David Howell has been very successful as a commentator, and he essentially was like, yeah, I mean, I enjoy it. And that's sort of the thing, is that with people who've sort of found these other avenues to make money, other ways to do things, there isn't the same pressure level. And so you can actually enjoy the chess. Whereas like for myself or David Howell, I'm pretty sure that you go back 5 years, like we're playing chess, we're trying to make a living, but at the end of the day, like we're not thrilled by playing chess. It's kind of like you're doing this, like, we're wasting our lives playing chess. It's a very negative mindset, very negative attitude. And that definitely doesn't help with performance. Whereas now, pretty much everything related to chess, I'm just very positive, because I know that I'm going to be going back to streaming and doing that. So I think just being positive, I mean, sort of, I would also say figuring out how to study a little bit better than I did in the past, like using the time, not spending 10 hours of study. If you study for 3-4 hours, but you're able to like study things that matter, that's much more important than just the sheer amount of time that you spend on the game. So it's a combination of many factors, but I think the main thing is just like the positivity, feeling very free playing chess, and also that everybody else is playing way too many tournaments, way too many.
And what's so interesting for me to hear that, Hikaru, is like, if I dial it back to like 2002, 3, 4. So 2004 then was I feel like your coming out moment where we played that US Championship, San Diego, right? And what every GM was just in consternation about, flabbergasted, was you were spending all your time playing Blitz online. And they were like, how come this kid isn't doing like the Russian school or whatever? And while you were talking just then, I was thinking to myself, Hikaru as a kid maybe was just playing all that Blitz because there was so much pressure on him from everywhere to be a success, right? That when you like were in that zone, it was so much easier just to do this adrenaline rush of Blitz, where it's like you don't even have to think about anything. It's this zone that you can fall into for hours and hours and hours, where you don't feel that pressure.
Right. I mean, that is part of it. One funny thing about that, though, is that nowadays I would argue that's the norm. I mean, like when I go online, like just yesterday, I was playing against, there's this like 12-year-old Turkish kid who's like 2,500. He's going to be a GM very soon. There's also an Iranian kid who's like 13. That's actually almost the norm now. That's how a lot of the kids now improve. Right. I would argue that's more important than any other method at this point. So maybe I was actually the first person who figured it out to some degree. Definitely there's a lot of pressure. I mean, it's a different kind of pressure, obviously, when you're a kid, because certainly as a kid, the pressure is just like try and improve, feeling like you've got to be successful one way or another. I think as a young adult, the pressure was completely different. It's more from a financial perspective of really, and again, I mean, this probably sounds silly, because I think, nobody really has a secure job in life per se. But I think for me, a lot of the pressure I felt was sort of making sure that I maintained my level, making sure that I was going to be okay. Because year after year, if you don't maintain your rating, like let's just say you go below 2,700, your earnings basically dry up completely. You're going to lose like 75% of your earnings if you fall outside the top 20 or top 25. And so for me, that was like a constant pressure that was always sort of nagging, eating away at me throughout my career. I mean, maybe not at the very start, because I think when you break through for the first year or two, it's very cool. You get to travel a lot, play these top level tournaments, get paid good amounts of money. But once you get past that, and then secondly, once you realize there's this annoying player who happens to be better than everyone else and becoming world champion is pretty unlikely, I feel like the mindset just changes completely. But certainly, yeah, as a kid, I played a lot of Blitz. That's how I improved. I was very lucky. I got to play against a lot of good players like Gata, Rajabov, many others online at the time. And yeah, to some degree, I would say it was a bit of an escape from pressure, but it was also, frankly, I just loved playing chess. It didn't matter what it was. I just loved playing, and I felt like the experience mattered. And as I said, I mean, I did things differently then. I mean, I think I've done a lot of things differently throughout my life. But the funny thing is now that is almost that is pretty much the norm. I mean, that is how kids improve. They go online, they play against me in Blitz, and they get this invaluable experience. Another one is like there's this guy V Pranav or Buddy Pranav from India. Another guy who, when he was like 12, I was playing, and he was already getting good, but now he's like 2600. He's like 16, and it's amazing to see.
Yeah, actually, Hikaru, did you catch our podcast where we ranked the top juniors
I
in
did
the
not.
world? Oh, okay, that's
or no, I think I watched that one, but I didn't catch that segment actually where you ranked them. I mean,
gotcha.
I could obviously rank them too if you want me to.
Yeah. We were all curious, like who would be your top. I guess we all drafted, but who would be like your top five juniors?
Five.
If you had to pick.
So right now, I would say head and shoulders above everybody else would be Prag and Ananta, and there really are two reasons for that. And one of them is related to the World Cup. So in the World Cup, when Prag went very deep, he basically showed that he has really, really good nerves. And again, I can't really, for someone who's never played in the Canada's or hasn't looked at the games very closely or is of a very high level, it's something hard to understand. But with the Canada's tournament, one thing that I didn't mention earlier is that I think if you look at the Canada's tournament versus almost any other top level tournament, the performance of the players is significantly worse. I think the players play at like 2,700 or lower on average. I know there are stats on this. And so what does that say? That basically says that the players, essentially what happened to me in 2016, is the players get too nervous. They're so nervous about this golden ticket to make a lot of money, play for the world championship, the ultimate title, and they all sort of collapse under the pressure. So I would say Prag, simply based on the fact that in the World Cup, when the stakes were very high, the Canada's qualification was close, he kept his nerves together. On top of that, he was playing against the best players in the world, players like myself, Fabiano, and Magnus. So I would easily rank him number one right now, just based off of his composure. And obviously, rating-wise, I think he's up there. I guess Alireza, is he technically? I don't really think of Alireza as junior.
I think he's still under 21. Yeah, he still counts.
He was on our draft.
Okay. Well then, okay. Alireza has to be number one just because his peak is 2,800. Prag is number two. And after that, I would say right now, just looking at the performances and the consistency, I probably would say Kamer is number three for me. I think Vincent has shown great performances pretty much everywhere this year. He played very well in the World Cup, other than the one hiccup against Magnus, that second game. He's playing pretty well in the European Team Championship. I don't think he was doing great in Isle of Man, but I think he was up there near the top. So I would say he has to be number three, and then I think it's sort of the rest after that. There are many others who are very good, like Noterbeck, for example. But Noterbeck, I think, got to 2740, took a step back. So I would say there's the top three. Gukesh is up there, of course, as someone in chat mentioned. But I would say the top three are very clear, and after that, I think it becomes sort of you can pick anybody, is what I would say. I don't think there's any big difference between the rest.
But you feel like you can discern with pretty good confidence between like Kamer and Gukesh or something like that. Like you can really see the difference at your level.
I mean, I think what I would say is that when I look at the games, I feel like for Vincent, he's playing very well against players of all the rating ranges. So, like for example, when he plays against the Magnus of the world, the high 2700s, not 2700, sorry, like 2750 plus. I feel like he's able to maintain his own, but I also feel like when he plays against like the 2600, 2650 range, he's also crushing them as well. So I feel like he's playing very well against all the rating ranges. I feel like with Gukesh, obviously he hasn't played as many tournaments, but it felt like in Norway Chess he struggled a lot against the absolute best, where he's an absolute machine. He just mows down like the 2600 players every day, it seems like, other than the last two tournaments. But it felt like he's playing very well against that band of players, but not against the absolute top. So that's what I would say for the top three. I mean, I can obviously look. I see like Arjun's number 4, Noterbeck is number 5, Gukesh is number 6. I actually think if I look at it, I think Sindarov is a player who's very sort of underrated right now, someone who has a lot of potential. He's only 17 years old, from Uzbekistan, so he's in the running as well, I would say. But really, for me, I think those top three are undisputed, and then we'll see who else joins them.
I don't know, but Kostya and Jesse, like I feel like when we were picking, I was mostly just guessing. I don't know if you guys felt like really confident about some of the picks, but when I look at like one 18-year-old rated 2710 and another rated 2715, and like one week one of them gains 20 points and the next week the other one does, when we were drafting, I basically felt like I'm guessing.
Yeah, it does feel random. Actually, like, a couple of years ago, Nepo wasn't like a top player in the world. He was like 2720 for a little while. And then all of a sudden he like shot up to basically 2800, which was kind of surprising. Like he and Andreykin basically were like right around the same. Andreykin has kind of like stayed at that level, and Nepo like went up to 2800. It's hard to say why exactly. One player
like
goes
how
up,
anyone before that could have predicted that this is somebody who will play for the world championship.
Yeah.
That is true, but on the other hand, I would say that like one of the things, especially since I play against all these guys, is sort of you look at how they play against the very top players, and I think that gives you a good sense of what their potential is. Like you look at Ali Reza, for example, before he had completely broken through. Like even though it was mostly online, because he was playing as 2600s. Over the board, he was able to match up against myself and Magnus pretty evenly online. I think that's sort of a very good sign. Nepo also. The reason I brought that up is because I think Nepo had a very, very good score against Magnus. He was always drawing or beating Magnus up until, I mean, I don't want to say like last 5-6 years, but he had a very good score, and he always gave Magnus problems. And I think that's a very good barometer, is when you see how someone is doing against the absolute top players, even if it's only a handful of games. And so, like when I look at players like Sindarov, for example, I played him in the Qatar Masters in Doha, and he was playing very, very good chess. A little bit too tactical, perhaps, but very, very good chess against me. He beat Ali Reza in the World Cup a few years ago, and so that's why I actually brought him up specifically. And also like Vincent as well, same thing. Like he's played against the best players in the world, and he's definitely held his own. And I think that's a very good barometer of what the potential peak can be.
Oh, that's interesting.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
We could redo the draft now that we know how to draft.
We wanted to talk a little bit about the, your thoughts on the future of chess, whether you think it's going to move more in like the rapid and blitz direction, and if that's something like you would actually want to see, if like you'd prefer to just play online all the time, or if you still like, you still want to be playing classical well into the future.
Yeah, so I guess we'll get to the first hot take. And I mean, I've said this before on my stream, but I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I've spent so many hours playing many online tournaments over the last 3 years. It started with I think it was called the Magnus Carlsen Invitational and the Magnus Carlsen Tour during the pandemic in 2020. But I played so many rapid events online. I don't know if it's just because I'm getting older or what it might be, but I actually thoroughly unenjoyed the last couple of Chess Champions Tour events that I played online. I would say that I'm pretty much over online rapid chess. I just don't enjoy it at all. I don't have a good time. It's not fun for me. So as far as I'm concerned, like I really don't want to see more online rapid tournaments. I'm not even sure if I really would even play in them, frankly, because for me it's just it's not something that I want to do. And like I said, it's not even necessarily result specific. It's more that I think I've just played too many of these events, and the notion of sitting in front of a screen and trying to actually do serious calculations for 5 or 6 minutes on a given move is just not something that I want to do going forward. So as far as online goes, I'm pretty skeptical. Now there are a couple of ways of looking at this. First thing, as far as online chess goes, is whether there are sponsors. Now, when we go back to 2020, there were a lot of sponsors for pretty much everything, chess, esports, etc., because the world was shut down. There were the lockdowns, major sports weren't happening, and so there were a lot of ad dollars that were not being spent across the board. And so for that reason, many traditional companies, they started looking to Twitch, to YouTube, trying to place their ads and get exposure that way, and do sponsorships, which is why I think initially we did see the rise of the tour, the Chess Champions Tour, the Magnus Carlsen Tour, during that time period. But as we go forward, I would say that I think as a whole, if you cannot get the sponsors, you're not going to be seeing more online tournaments. And I think that the world that we live in now, with the economy, interest rates going up a lot, Companies are not spending as much money as they once were. You will probably have noticed if you look at like my streams, Botez, etc., that we are doing a lot less sponsor streams now than we were, say, in 2020 or 2021 specifically. So I would say that there isn't the same appetite for these sponsorships across the board. But then if you don't have the sponsorships, really the economic model doesn't make sense of holding more events. So as I see it, I don't really think we're going to be seeing more tournaments online. I think we'll continue to see a Chess Champions Tour probably online, but I don't really see any way that is going to change going forward. And also because, frankly, I think now with the world being open, sporting events, everything else, I don't think that advertisers are spending their money on online the way that they were before. So I don't think we're ever going back to that world where you're going to see you're going to see a bunch of new online tournaments happening. I just don't think so. So online, of course, someone in chat says online classical. That'll never be a thing for very, very obvious reasons. But I don't think we're gonna see more online rapid blitz and bullet. You never know, maybe it's possible. But I think we're in a spot where we have the major events. I don't think there's any real incentive or need to add more events. So online, I don't think it's changing. I think we've reached sort of the maximum point of tournaments. As far as over the board goes, though, I would argue you have the same issue, though, fundamentally, which is that what is the reason for having more rapid and blitz events as opposed to classical? The first and foremost reason is because for a viewer it's too long. I mean, no average Joe can spend six hours watching a classical game of chess. It's not feasible. I mean, almost for anybody, it's not realistic. So nobody wants to watch games that are that long. And then, of course, you have the secondary problem, which is that most of those games are going to end in draws anyway. So you have these two big issues with classical chess from a viewership standpoint. But then you could argue, well, if you're looking at the viewership standpoint, what is the need for viewers? Like, what does that really change? And again, it comes down to the question of sponsors. And I think, even though it's over the board, there still are a lot of people who watch the events over the board when they're broadcast online. I know for myself, one thing that changed a lot, or not changed, but really surprised me was in I think it was in 2021. The years sort of blend together now. I actually got an invite from the FIDE president, Arkady Dvorkovich, to play in the FIDE Grand Prix. And up to that point, I mean, everything had been online. I think chess.com even put out a tweet when I won that first event that I hadn't played chess or over the board chess in 836 days. And so, like, up to then, like, the whole notion of playing chess and like having a broadcast even was not really, I mean, it wasn't something I had thought about. But then when I played the tournament, of course I did well, which helped. But there were a lot of people who actually were very interested in that, which to me was very strange. Of course, I've spent my whole life playing chess. Like, what's the big deal? Like, online or the board, I mean, it shouldn't make a big difference. But I think because so many people who got into chess during the pandemic had only seen people streaming chess online, it was like this whole weird new thing, this fascination that they're playing over the board chess as well, because you've only seen us like clicking with our mice in blitz games online. And so there is a big appetite. There are a lot of people who do watch the broadcasts of the events. And so if you can show, let's just say, a certain number of concurrent viewers on a broadcast of a chess tournament, there's a very good chance that you'll be able to get sponsorship out of that, or at least that's the hope. Now, in the modern world, it's a little bit different, of course, with the economy, but at least if you go back to like 2021 or 2022, that was sort of the thought process. So essentially, if you're able to get a certain amount of viewers and you can get sponsors, that's very good for chess as a whole. It's good for, say, let's just say chess.com, let's say they're running an event, or FIDE or whomever it might be, because they're probably going to be able to turn a profit. The company gets exposure, and then the viewers are very happy. And last but not least, the players are also getting paid more. Like, it's the more money there is in chess, the better off it is for the professionals who I mean, some people say they earn too much, some people say they don't earn enough, but either way, they're making more money. And in any field, that's always a good thing when the top competitors or the top professionals are making a better living. So that's the argument for it. But again, in the current world that we live in, where sponsorships are a lot harder to come by, I don't necessarily think that we're trending in that direction. I mean, I know Magnus Carlsen has been very outspoken on this topic about wanting more blitz, more rapid. It seems like, frankly, things are going the opposite direction, I would argue, where we have more, let's just say, classical tournaments or fast classical, whatever you want to call it, happening, as opposed to more rapid and blitz tournaments. And I think that's probably mostly due to the fact that that a lot of people do enjoy, like the serious chess fans do enjoy the slower games with less mistakes, but then also a lack of sponsorship. So I don't think we're moving in that direction necessarily. I think if there's more money coming into the game for Rapid and Blitz, then we could move that direction. But for right now, I think where we're at is where it's going to stay with mostly classical tournaments. We might have like faster classical, like you're already seeing where the games are 90 plus 30, 90 minutes with 30-second increment for move one, and then just a second control of 30 minutes. A lot of tournaments in the past, games could go like 5, 6, 7 hours. Now the games get sped up quite a bit. I do think there's a world where the games could become even quicker, to where it's like 60 minutes for the entire game with 30 seconds for move one, and then a sudden death control of 30 minutes after move 40. So I think there's a world where we can end up with even faster classical chess. But I think the notion of moving towards like rapid is just not. I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense if professionals, let's say a little bit below your level, but professional players, let's say 2650 to low 2700s, do you think that they're making more money from OTB chess than they are from like Title Tuesdays and global chess championships and speed chess championships, all these sort of suite of other events?
Yeah, so I think there are a handful of people who've done very well online. I think people like Josmim or David Pravian or Dmitry Andreikin, the usual Title Tuesday suspects, who have done who have done quite well. But I would say that in general, I think most people are probably still making most of their money the same way they were before the pandemic, which is from over the board tournaments, whether it might be whether it's league games, playing the European leagues, whether it's playing the Opens. I think for most people it has not changed. Is what I would say. I think it's remained mostly the same, but I do think events like the global chess league, actually, I will point that out, are very, very good, because that is a team event. So you're seeing players who are like 2,500 who are playing as part of a competitive team, and they are getting paid quite well from what I've heard, which is definitely a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Hikaru, don't want to keep you for too long. Just curious, do you have other events coming up that you're planning on doing?
Yeah, so I mean, it's as I said like before about like I have certain criterias for tournaments. 2024, of course, is an off year in terms of qualifying for the candidates. I mean, if I win the candidates and I make a world championship match, obviously everything is subject to change. But if I don't, then the most likely I'll be playing. Oh, I'm playing the candidates in April. I'll be playing Norway Chess at the end of May. Those are the two big events. After that, I don't really have anything planned, and mainly, again, it's because there are no tournaments that are going to be qualifying for the next cycle for the candidates tournament, and just I sort of feel like I want a little bit of a break. Somehow this year I felt like I played too much chess. I know my results are very good, but I felt like I played more chess than I would have liked to have played overall. So as of right now, I just have 2 tournaments planned, and that's it for right now.
Well, any like special goals or long-term ideas for like your stream and your content?
I mean, I don't have specific ideas. I mean, mostly I continue to do what I do. I'd love to put together an event down the road. Again, one of the things that has really sort of, I think, changed the landscape is the way the economy has shifted, the sort of the downfall in a sense of esports as well. If I go back to like 2021 or even 2022, there were some very big events I was trying to put together. There was like the decathlon event that I was doing in conjunction with Misfits. There was PogChamps, of course, which was great. So I'd like to do something more in the vein of that. On the other hand, I'm also intending to start working on a book pretty soon. Not a chess specific book, a book sort of about my life, about lessons, all these lot of stuff similar to what we talked about today. So I am starting to work on that as well, but that's pretty much it. I mean, I think, again, at the end of the day, like I really do enjoy being in the position I'm in right now, streaming quite a bit, creating the content, covering games, all these different things. So I'm pretty good right now. Also, I saw someone in chat wrote something that said, "Is he still coming to Morocco?" Actually, and I did want to clear this up, because I know Jesse had he's like, why isn't Hikaru playing the U.S. Championship? He's got to go for another title.
Yeah.
But actually, I mean, there are a couple things. The first reason is I did have a scheduling conflict. I was going to be in Morocco at the same time, and then there shortly before they were making the final planning for the event. There was a big earthquake that happened there. Everything got thrown into disarray, and the event got canceled. And we didn't talk about this either, but one good thing you can look at it as good or bad, depending. Like if you're me, it's bad. For a lot of pros, I would say it's good. But for a lot of tournaments now, the dates are being set really far out in advance. So I believe, like, for example, at chess.com, I think they're going to be releasing their entire 2024 calendar of events pretty soon, if I'm not mistaken. And like the US Championship, and the Grand Chess Tour, they actually sent out the invitations about 3.5 to 4 months before the events begin. So with the U.S. Championship, the contracts I believe were sent out in, I think it was early July, for an event in late October. I think it was late October, maybe it was start, but
October.
Yeah, it was like October 4th, I think. So it was early July when the contract was sent out, and with the contract being sent out, obviously I declined it. And I suppose there's some world where when the Morocco filming event got canceled, I could have perhaps asked for a spot, or someone could have left the event. I mean, it's not unprecedented, because I think it was Bill some years back, Magnus was not playing the event, and somehow he was playing, like 2010 maybe, or 2011, ages ago at any rate. So it's not unprecedented, but certainly it didn't feel right to me to try and do that, and also with the Qatar Masters being possible to play as well, it just didn't make a whole lot of sense. That was the first reason. The second thing is that, like, at this point, I was going to play the U.S. Championships. I mean, other than the money, what am I really playing for? Sure, you could say it's prestigious because it's very strong. I mean, it's stronger than most of the U.S. Championships that I won in the past, for sure. But like, I'm obviously never going to get to 8 titles. I mean, that's just not realistic at this point. I mean, maybe I could win 1 or 2 more, but if I'm not going to get to 8 and it's just another chance, then what's the use? But me, if I want to throw a bit of shade here for a second, I mean, I'll blame Gary, because there was a U.S. Championship. I think there was 1 or 2 of the U.S. Championships that I would have played in the past, but Gary didn't let me play in them. And if I had like 1 or 2 more U.S. Championships, I think there's actually a pretty good chance that I would play and try to get to 8. Because I think if I was already at 6, I'd have a shot. But being at 5, I think it's not realistic to even shoot for 8. The field is too strong. Even Fabi winning 2 years in a row is an amazing performance. But without that, it's just like, what's other than the financial end of it, what's the point? And it is a lot of work too. I mean, I think a lot of people don't realize just how hard it is to play these long games of chess in the Grand Swiss or otherwise, and then do these recaps. I mean, it's very, very difficult. It takes a lot of energy, and by the end of the tournament, I'm generally just dead, completely dead, because when you play these long games, normally what you do is you play the long game, go eat some dinner, probably relax for 30 minutes, and go start studying again. And having to do the recaps, and then even better, having to do the recaps in one take, where I can't just like restart them, makes it even more difficult. But it's just a lot of work, and so for me, the risk reward isn't there, and that's the main reason that I don't.
Wait,
don't play.
why can't you edit the recap videos? You can't just send them to someone and just say, "Hey, I messed up at 5 minutes. Edit this out," or.
Well, okay, you want another little, another little YouTube trick that I'll tell you guys about, which is generally because of where I'm at, there are other channels that will cover my games in their recaps. Of course, there are 2 very specific ones. I don't need to name them. Everyone knows what they are. And so at the end of the day, if you're not sort of the first out, or you're not at the same time, the views on a video are probably going to be at least like 25 to 30% less. So let's say let's just say I do it where I can edit, and I do a video and then it's published 4 hours after the game. It'll be the third video out. Two other channels will have covered it. I'm going to get a lot less views, and then it's almost like, what's the point of doing it? So if you're covering it, and I mean, I think a lot of people would have noticed this with like World Championship matches and candidates. It's always a bit of a race to try to be the first person to get the recap out. Now that's a little bit different, of course, than playing like the Grand Swiss, but nonetheless, if you aren't, even if I'm second by a few minutes, it doesn't matter, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. But if you're hours later, the views are going to be a lot lower on a video. So that is actually ultimately the reason that I do it in one take versus like trying to pause and edit and all those other things. Because as you know, you have to render, you have to do these things. It's going to take time.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thanks, Hikaru. That was great. Yeah, we usually try to keep it around 1 hour, but thanks for joining us. That was very enlightening. I think we all learned a lot about what
No problem.
things are like.
Great.
learn.
Are there any final things you want to set us right on? Because I know you were listening to the pod and you had some disagreements with the things that we were saying.
Not real. I mean, I wouldn't say it's disagreements. I think it's just that the thing to me that is that's really difficult about this whole world that I live in with everything happening online is that at the end of the day there really is no transparency. So like when I say that I make a lot more streaming and making content creation than playing chess, like without giving exact numbers, it's very hard I think for people to understand. But it is like substantially more. It's like 5 or 6x at least versus what I made, in my best year playing chess professionally.
Right.
And I think that's the thing is like when it gets to that stage, like the whole mentality, my view of a lot of things chess related have changed a lot since the pre-pandemic, specifically for that reason. And on some level, I wish there was more transparency about all this stuff, because I think if there's more transparency, a lot of things that I say, a lot of things I think that Levy has said, it would make a lot more sense, as opposed to, in many cases, people assuming that we just make things up. So you just make it up for clickbait, whatever. Like you're just trying to be salacious and so forth. And that is maybe the one thing that I hope down the road at some point is like, hopefully Levy and I can maybe at some point, maybe we can be the ones to like sort of just lay out all the cards and explain all this stuff. But at the end of the day, I think that what everyone does for sort of chess as a whole is very, very good. I mean, I think what you guys are doing is fantastic, and I remember, if I go back to like 2020, even the very early days of the boom and everything, and when one boat gets lifted, every boat gets lifted. So it's like if I do well, or you guys do well, or whomever it might be does well, at the end of the day, that is very good for everybody. Sure, it's not going to be distributed equally across the board, but nonetheless, I think everyone does better when chess is doing better. And I think that's very important. I just hope that as we move forward, people do keep that in mind, whether it's FIDE-Chess.com or others, but just that the chess world can sort of try to act as a whole, because what's good for one is good for all.
Yeah, we're all on a team. I love it.
Yeah.
All right,
and we're going to be on Team Hikaru at this candidates event, man. That's going to be the real team. There
well,
we go.
I mean, but actually, let me say one other thing. This is also another thing that I would, since I just said things have shifted so much, but like if you go back to like 2017 or 2018, if you were to tell me like that I'm going to be playing the candidates with Fabiano, for example, I would have been like, okay, obviously I want to win, but my other part would be anybody wins but Fabiano. That would have literally been my thought, because of course, when you look at it back at the time, I mean, it's very much like we're pure competitors. We're both pro players. Like we're both Americans, obviously. Like if Fabi qualifies for a match, it's horrible. And actually, in 2018, like I'm not gonna lie, I was actually quite sad when he qualified initially for the World Championship match. But now, I mean, I look at all these things so differently. And honestly, going to the candidates, I would say that, I mean, I really do hope that one of the two of us does qualify, because looking forward, at least as far as American chess goes, I think that we have probably this candidates maybe one more cycle where I think both myself and Fabiano have pretty good chances to make it to a match and maybe win. But after that, I do think that I mean, it's very hard to envision a world in like Canada's 24. So it's very hard to envision a world where in like 2028, Fabiano is still at the top of his game, competing as like Prag, Hamer, Gukesh, everybody else. It's hard to envision that world. So I think it's great that there are two Americans who are in the candidates, and hopefully one of the two of us does make it through.
Nice.
Yep. Yeah.
Cool.
Good times.
All right. Yeah. Thanks again, Hikaru. Thanks everyone for listening. And that'll do it. That'll do it for the pod. See you guys next time.
See you guys.